I was like, baby, 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 oh, like baby, 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 oh, like baby, 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 oh, thought you'd always be mine, mine. Oh, I didn't see you there. Let's go ahead and, I was singing about a baby, and we're going to talk about babies a little bit today. Today we're giving some background on the topic of abortion. So there's no PowerPoint for this, it's just notes and just kind of background on what abortion is, when life begins, what a baby is, what a fetus is, and what the history of abortion in law in America is. So we're going to go through some stuff. This is just going to be hopefully pretty much informational stuff, which will give us some context for then when we get into Catholic teaching in Notes 3. So here we go. What is an abortion? An abortion is a premature ending of a pregnancy before like 36 weeks. Normally, a pregnancy is counted about 40 weeks. Anytime after 36 weeks is considered full term. The baby born after that is considered not premature, but healthy. So if a premature ending of a pregnancy where the baby dies is considered an abortion. Baby lives is just considered premature birth. If the baby dies naturally, that's called a spontaneous abortion or a miscarriage due to natural causes. And then there's an induced abortion, which is how we use the word abortion like 99% of the times. It means medical intervention. There was a surgery or a pill or something chemical or surgical or medical. There's an intervention to end that pregnancy to kill the fetus, child, baby, whatever you're going to call it. So types of abortion. When we're talking about abortion from here on out, we'll be talking about induced abortion. Most people, except in the medical world, don't really use spontaneous abortion. That's really just in the medical field. So types of abortion, there's medical, meaning it's a series of pills, which causes the woman to deliver the baby prematurely, and the baby will not survive that. And this must be within the first 7 weeks of pregnancy. By the way, trigger warning on this whole video because if you've had an abortion, if you know someone that's had an abortion, again, I'm just going to try to be as informational as possible here, but just trigger warning, this might be some sensitive stuff for some of you who might have been through some stuff. Okay, then different types of surgical abortions. So the one is called vacuum aspiration or suction cure. I don't know how to pronounce that. So that's 6 to 16 weeks. So pretty early on from when the woman knows she's pregnant through like what they call the first trimester. Pregnancy is often broken up into 3 sections. They call them trimesters. So that's before 16 weeks. That's pretty common. So are medical abortions. Those are, again, that would be a first trimester, first 7 weeks. So that's pretty early on. D&E, that's after 16 weeks. That's getting into second trimester. That's pretty late. And then dilation and extraction, a DNX. That's after 21 weeks. That's when you hear people talk about late term abortions, that's pretty late. There are babies that live born at like 22, 23 weeks sometimes. I don't know what the earliest, there might be some as early as 21 weeks. I'm not sure. Probably not. I think it's like 23 weeks is the earliest. And those are like the preemie babies that come out and they're like a pound and they're like super tiny and they need to like be on like full-time life support for a while. So after 21 weeks, that's considered late term. Again, dilation and extraction. Sometimes it's called intrauterine cranial decompression, which if that's just kind of nauseating to think about. This is what, if you've ever heard of partial birth abortion, that's what that's called. It's when they kind of extract the baby part way before they do the abortion. So. And some of those types have been banned by the Supreme Court. All right, so that's what an abortion is. Those are the different types. If you're interested in more on that, Live Action on YouTube, just search Live Action abortion on YouTube, and they have some good videos on like how abortions are done, and they're done with like drawings. In ways that are like realistic enough that you know what's going on, but not so realistic that it's like blood and guts. So if you're interested in that, go to Live Action on YouTube. All right, so what is conception or fertilization? The pro-life movement often says that human life begins at conception. So conception in sexual reproduction, so there's asexual reproduction where just like an amoeba goes and just like cell divides. But then there's sexual reproduction where there's a sperm and there's an egg from the female and a sperm from the male, and the sperm fertilizes the eggs, and that's the gametes, the sexual cells from the different the male and the female, and they fuse together, and that's called fertilization. And this moment is the beginning of a new organism of whatever species you're talking about. So in this case, human. This is where a new, living, unique human being occurs. This is the beginning of a human life. You and I once started this way. I was never an egg. I was never a sperm. You were never an egg. You were never a sperm. But once that came together, it's got your DNA. It's got your chromosomes. That is you. And this is hotly debated, even though it's settled science and has been for a long time. So this is let's break this down. So why is it new? It's not part of the mother. It's not part of the father. It's got its own DNA. It's a separate organism. The only thing it requires to grow to adulthood are the same things that you and I require to grow and have required to grow to adulthood, or you guys are still growing to adulthood in some cases. You require as a kid natural habitat that you can live in, so you're like not out in outer space. You need like air and water and food and like temperature control. You need nutrients. You need food and water. And that's the same for all living animals. So once conception has happened, the sperm and the egg have come together. They just need a habitat they can live in. For the first part, that's a womb, and then after that, that's like normal human habitat, and then just nutrients to survive, and then grow to adulthood. So that's the difference between a sperm cell and an embryo. Right, sperm cell, if you give it nutrients and time, it's never going to grow to an adult, right? You give an egg from a woman, the habitat, nutrients, and time, it's never going to grow to an adult. So that's why they are living. They are living and they have human DNA, but they're not unique human beings. They're not human organisms in the way that once that embryo is formed, now it's a human organism. It's a human being. It's a creature. It's a new member of the species with its own DNA, and it will grow to adulthood given the necessities of life. Okay, so it's living. How do we know it's living? Well, what is life? These are the conditions that distinguish animals and plants from inorganic matter. So growth and development. The embryo grows and develops. It responds to its environment. It has cellular structure. It's made of structure and composition. One of the things you'll often sometimes hear pro-choice people say is like, oh, the embryo is not alive, it's just a clump of cells. Well, actually, that's a sign that it is alive if it's a clump of cells. Cells are one of the hallmarks of human life. That's one of the ways we define life, is that it's made of cells. So that's actually a bad argument. Metabolism, meaning it can take energy from chemical reactions. Homeostasis, meaning it maintains like its inner stability. Heredity of traits, it gets traits from its parents and is able to pass them on once it's able to reproduce. So these are all the characteristics of life. You and I have them, and we've had them ever since we were embryos. So the embryo is unique. It has its own DNA, different from the mother and the father, or any other human that will ever exist, unless it splits at some point into two and becomes identical twins. But sex, eye color, many other characteristics are already determined at that point. And it's human because, I mean, it's that human, like the offspring, or this is always going to be the same species as the parents, right? Like it's not a dog embryo, it's not a pig embryo, it's a human embryo. So it is absolutely 100% fact, like not really disputable, that at conception forms a new living, unique human being. And a lot of people think that is up for debate, and we can't know when life begins. President Obama was famous for saying, when somebody asked him when life begins, and he says, oh, that's above my pay grade. It kind of sidestepped the question. It's like, well, actually, we know very clearly when life begins. Now, do human beings at that very early stage deserve the same rights as you and me? That's a different question. But when human life begins, settled science, not really debatable, like totally demonstrable from science. Okay, so fetal development. From conception to birth, so fertilization happens on day 1. There's when all the chromosomes are present. Unique human life begins. Embryo implants into the uterus at day 6. Day 22, this is just like 3 weeks in, before the woman probably even knows she's pregnant, before she's even missed her period, the heartbeat begins. And so the heartbeat is there from very, very, very early on with the embryo's own blood. Oftentimes a different blood type than the mother. The mother can be type O, the baby can be type A or A negative or whatever. By the end of the third week, embryo's backbone, spinal column, nervous system are forming. So you can kind of go through this. If you can just kind of see week 5, the eyes and legs and hands begin to develop. So you can just kind of see how early a lot of this stuff starts to develop. Eyelids, toes, organs by week 8. So by week 12, and by this point is when most abortions happen. But the fetus has all the parts necessary to experience pain, including nerves, spinal cord, thalamus, vocal cords. The fetus can suck its thumb. Now we're into the second trimester. Heart's pumping blood, adult taste buds, bone marrow. They can dream at week 17. Here's the possibility. So week 21 is the earliest possibility of survival. Well, that's what we've accomplished so far. That keeps inching back as we get better with medical technology. That's called viability. That's at what point can the fetus survive outside the mother. So at week 20, the fetus recognizes its mother's voice. I'm skimming through a lot of this. You can read it if you're interested. And you can see where I got the original source for this. All right. Let's keep going. So the legal status of abortion in America. This is interesting. So in the early America, and by America I mean the United States, it was legal. In state by state, it was criminalized in the mid to 1800s. So every state criminalized it in some way. There were, the first feminist movement, who were the suffragists, the women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, they were very much in support of criminalizing abortion, making abortion illegal because they saw it as like oppressive towards women, as a way that like men could like sexually use women and then not have to care for their children. Now, part of the reason it started to be criminalized is one, because feminists were behind it. And two, something a lot of people don't know, because feminists nowadays, most modern feminists are very much pro-choice, but the original feminists were very much pro-life. But also because they were gaining advances in embryology, when they were figuring out all this stuff about when the sperm and the egg meet and when there's DNA and life begins at conception. They figured that out in the 1800s. We've known this for a long time. And that's why they started to be like, oh, well, maybe abortion isn't okay. So in the mid-20th century, so this is like the 1950s, those laws came under attack from people who were promoting contraception, so birth control and that sort of thing. 1960s, abortion activists succeeded in scaling back and even repealing some state laws. So some state laws got repealed in the 1960s for a few reasons. One, they wanted to reduce population growth. They wanted to increase the safety of abortion because some women were doing it and doctors were doing it illegally and not safely. And eventually it was argued that this would increase women's equality in the workplace if we gave women access to abortion. In the early 1970s, there were state laws. Some states allowed it, some states didn't, but there were restrictions in all 50 states. Every state had some restriction on abortion. You can just get one whenever you want. Some banned it outright, some just only banned late-term abortions. Then in 1973, this landmark Supreme Court case, well, two Supreme Court cases, Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton, wipe out all of these laws and basically make it unconstitutional to put any meaningful restriction on abortion and make it so that our abortion laws in America ever since have been some of the most liberal in the world, even though there are many more countries in like Europe that are much more liberal than us normally, but they have much more conservative abortion laws. It's because of Roe v. Wade. So what did Roe v. Wade do? So there was this woman in Texas who wanted an abortion. Her name was Norma McCorvey. In Texas, you could not have an abortion. So they called her Roe, Jane Roe, for the court case to protect her identity. She died just a couple years ago, but for most of her life, she was actually a pro-life activist after this. She ended up switching sides. She never ended up having an abortion, by the way, and she ended up becoming a pro-life activist and like trying to, if you Google Norma McCorvey, you can read about her story. So this is what the court decided. The court said, when does life begin? That's uncertain, which it wasn't, but that's what they thought. They said, therefore, a woman's rights, which are clear, have priority over the rights of the fetus, which are unclear. Which, again, they knew when life begins, but for some reason they just didn't think they did. So as the unborn child gets closer to birth, the more of an interest the state has in its well-being, especially after viability, especially after the baby can survive outside the womb. And so in a 7-2 vote, so 7 of the Supreme Court judges voted for Roe v. Wade, 2 against it. What they said was, in the first trimester, states and Congress may not regulate abortion. The second trimester, regulations only to protect the mother's health. viability after 24 to 28 weeks, which has been pushed back by medical science since then. And then after that, there in the third trimester, there are regulations permitted so long as abortion is still available and the mother's life is in danger. And so Roe v. Wade changed all the abortion laws in America. 50 states, which all had some abortion restrictions. Some outlawed abortion totally, some just restricted it at each state. So all 50 of those laws were struck down by Roe v. Wade by 7 people who were unelected as judges on the Supreme Court, unelected by anybody. They're appointed by the president. And so 7 unelected people overturned all 50 state laws. So some people are opposed to Roe v. Wade just because they think it's bad democracy. They think it's not good for the country that 7 people should have decided. And they think that was an abuse of the Supreme Court to go that way. And so that's sometimes called judicial activism, basically saying that the judges on the court are like making laws rather than just like judging the laws that there are. They're like making their own laws by like making such extreme decisions and saying some things are totally unconstitutional. So anyway, that's what they said in Roe v. Wade. Now, there was another case at about the same time, Doe versus Bolton. Again, the woman, so Jane Doe was the name they gave her to respect her privacy. I forget her name, but she also later became a pro-life activist for most of her life. But Roe v. Wade said you can't put any restrictions on abortions except really you can regulate things for the mother's health in the second trimester, and in the third trimester you can restrict it as long as there's an exception for the mother's life. So that would be very much in line with what laws in most of Europe have. Now, but Doe versus Bolton was kind of the 1-2 punch here. So Doe versus Bolton said all restrictions on abortion must have an exception clause, not just for the life of the mother, but for the health of the mother. And they defined health as physical, psychological, mental, emotional, or familial well-being. Now, if you've ever talked to a woman who has had a baby and asked them, well, was the pregnancy difficult on you mentally, emotionally, physically, on your family? Yeah, pregnancy is hard. And so basically what Doe versus Bolton did is it put this huge loophole in the middle of Roe v. Wade so that all these regulations there couldn't be any regulations really, because it wasn't just the life of the mother, it was the health of the mother. Health was defined so broadly that pretty much basically all the justification you need for an abortion was basically the doctor just had to say, oh, well, it affects her health. It affects her health. And pregnancy always affects her health. So basically, for any reason, after Doe versus Bolton and Roe v. Wade, for any reason through all 9 months of pregnancy in America, a woman can get an abortion, which is not a law that anybody has voted on. It's the way the Supreme Court in 1973 decided that was the way things were going to be. So now in 1992, there was a Supreme Court case called Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and a lot of people thought this was going to be when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it was looking like it was going to happen, but Justice Kennedy, who's still in the Supreme Court, changed his mind. The last minute was a 5-4 vote. That's as close as a Supreme Court vote can be. So 5 people who were unelected, decided Roe v. Wade was going to stand. And basically it reformulated the central idea of Roe v. Wade. Basically it said that states may enact abortion-related restrictions so long as that they do not place an undue burden on a woman's ability to obtain an abortion. So the undue burden standard applies to regulations on abortion before viability. After viability, states may enact restrictions to protect the life of the child, but must allow exceptions when the mother's life or health, again, there's that big loophole you could drive a truck through, is threatened. So this allowed for some minor new restrictions on abortion, such as some states can require a waiting period, can require you to an underage woman to notify her parents and to have some sort of informed consent, where basically the woman has to be notified of like, oh, well, these are the risks, this is some of the information, so that she is informed on what she's going through with. Another significant Supreme Court case, Gonzalez versus Carhart. And basically this was what banned partial birth abortions, which is it's called intact dilation and extraction, meaning that method of doing a late-term abortion is unconstitutional, even if it doesn't include a health exception. So basically that method is basically it was called partial birth abortion because they would birth the baby backwards, feet first, up to the head. This is kind of gruesome. And they leave the head inside the mother, and then they kill the fetus there, and then deliver it the rest of the way. So they basically have to deliver the child, kill it. Now, after that, what they do, so they this is still possible to have an abortion this late in pregnancy, but they changed the method. Now it's they deliver the baby up to the belly button and then kill it. So just a few inches more. So that changed is you used to be able to deliver a baby up to its head and it wasn't considered alive yet. Now you can just deliver it up. Now you can only deliver it up to the belly button before it's considered alive. So you can see kind of how sketchy some of these laws are. So the present law is that abortion is legal and available through all 9 months of pregnancy. In some cases, a judge or a doctor has to rule that the pregnancy threatens the woman's health. But again, this isn't hard because Doe versus Bolton made health be defined so broadly. So a fetus does not have rights until its belly button emerges from the womb, except in some cases where a third party attacks the mother and injures and kills the fetus. There are some states where, let's say, a woman is pregnant and somebody went up and like punched her in the stomach a bunch of times, and the baby died, the fetus died. He could be, in some cases, that person could be prosecuted as killing a human. Now, what's interesting is that mother could still go through with an abortion, and that's her right. So it's unconstitutional for states or Congress to enact laws that restrict abortion in any significant way. Many states have enacted minor restrictions on abortions that has collectively made abortion significantly more inconvenient for many people. By the way, this guy Carhart, Leroy Carhart, he is in Maryland because Maryland's such a liberal state, and he does partial birth abortions in Germantown. It's like right down the road from my parents' house. There's protests and stuff there all the time. Yeah, he's within driving distance. We could go drive there right now within a few minutes, and is one of the latest term abortion clinics in the country, and people come from all over the place to get late term abortions there. So that is a little background on abortion. So not the happiest topic, but now you know going forward, and we'll talk more about this in the next set of notes. We'll get into more the morality of it and Catholic teaching on it, and all that.